Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're excited to have Desiree Gigear with us, and Des will be presenting on item tracking in Business Central, setup options, gotchas, usage, and traceability. And I know you're all eager to get started with this presentation, so before I pass it over to Des, as a reminder, we are recording this webinar, and we will post it to our on-demand webinar library for you to review again or share with anyone. And if you do have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the questions box, and we will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. So now I'm going to pass it on over to Des to kick off our presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Angie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All righty. Good morning, everybody. My name is Desiree. Thank you for joining me. And we are going to talk about item tracking in Business Central. I know, riveting conversations, right? Let me get started by introducing myself. I am Desiree Gigear. I'm an application consultant here with Innovia. I have about 20 years experience working with NAV and Business Central, and I work here on the support desk, but I've played many roles from account management to project management and implementation, and really my love is supporting you, our customer. So I love being on the Innovia support team, supporting all versions of NAV and Business Central. You're going to hear me say Business Central and NAV or NAV interchangeably. I apologize. 20 years, we pick up habits. So anyway, so what are we going to talk about today? Item tracking and or lot tracking, serial tracking. Item tracking are the codes that we set up within Business Central that manages the behavior of our item tracking codes or our serial numbers or our lot numbers. A lot of times people assume there's just one way to do it, and there really isn't. There's a lot of different ways we can configure item tracking codes, and it just really depends on your business requirements and what you want to physically track. Then I'm going to cover a little bit of the item setup, because of course item tracking is item specific. So each of our items can be configured in many different ways. And then I'm going to go into some transactions and tracking the usage of lot tracking, serial tracking, and we're going to talk about some tracing. There's a couple of features and a couple of screens that we can use to our benefit to do some lot tracing. And then in support, we get a lot of this. Maybe you've set up a item tracking code on your own, or and maybe we missed a configuration. And one of the gotchas in the item tracking setup is that some of those features cannot be edited once there are item ledger entries for an item. You can't edit the item tracking code configuration. So how do I get my current item tracking code configuration changed after I've gone live with a particular setup? And I will go over that. There's a lot to it, and I would call that item tracking code setup advanced a webinar. And if you're interested in learning more about that or want to talk specifically about that, I can kind of help you through that. Just ping me, let me know. And let me go back one so you have my email address. There's my email address. So just ping me if you have questions. Also, if you have questions today, feel free to raise your hand. I hate talking to silence, so getting a question here or there would be really fun, and it's a nice way to break up the webinar. So ask at any time. All right, let's jump in. Item tracking code setup. Just going to go over a couple of slides. It makes it a little bit easier to talk about the details, but I promise you we'll also dive into Business Central as well and start using the system. But this is my item tracking code, general settings. This would coincide with lot numbers or serial numbers. I'm really focused on the lot numbers, as you can tell, but let's go over each of these in detail. So we've got a code in the description usually. You know, the code is representative of what we're going to track. So if it's a lot number, then in the code, I'd probably say lot, and then what kind of tracking am I going to do? So am I only tracking sales transactions? So I would say lot sales as my code for that item tracking code. And then in my description, I would give it a little more detailed, you know, lot number tracking for outbound sales orders only, you know. And then we've got specific tracking and lot warehouse tracking. And again, all of these settings are the same for serialization. So you'll have a set of these configurations for lot numbers as well as serial numbers. But lot specific tracking, this is pretty important to be checked, because if you don't have this checked, what this is going to do is ensure the inbound transactions marry up to your outbound transactions. So if I attempt to fulfill a sales order for a lot number and I do a lookup and I grab the lot number that I'm assigning this sales order and then ship it, what you're going to find if you dig further into the item ledger entry table is that Business Central has assigned the lot number that it deems necessary. In other words, there really is no user intervention. It's just, it's not specific, in other words. So my lot or serial tracking isn't specific. So anytime you want to track lots coming in and track it through all the transactions and then out the door, which is pretty darn typical, right? Why else would we want to do it? Then you must have this field checked. Otherwise, Business Central will manage assignment of a lot or a serial number to said transaction, to the outbound transaction. The next pretty important detail to check is the lot warehouse tracking. A lot of people miss this. They think, oh, well, you know what? We're not tracking, you know, we're not using the advanced warehouse features today. But what about tomorrow? What about scalability? What about next week or next year when we buy another warehouse? We really do want to be able to set up the item tracking codes once for today as well as for our future. So lot warehouse tracking is exactly what it sounds like. If I have advanced warehousing features turned on and now I'm starting to use maybe a warehouse shipment or a warehouse pick document to fulfill my sales orders, the minute I get into the where's my inventory instead of the quantity on hand, but where in the warehouse, what bin is it in, it loses visibility of that lot or serial number in the warehouse. So that is important. Usually best practice, I usually tell people set both of these. Set your specific tracking and set your warehouse tracking to yes, right out of the gates. Another really important one is this transfer tracking. It's exactly what it sounds like. If you're using transfer orders, this will also require users to identify an inbound item lot number as well as an outbound item lot number. So best practice, I would say yes to all three of these. The number info or lot number info, serial number info, I'm going to get into that in another slide. But inbound and outbound tracking, so that's what these all of these fields are for. And this is just basically your ability to identify what transactions you want to track lot or serial numbers throughout the system. I have seen where folks would set up sales outbound tracking only. Maybe I want to assign a serial number when the unit or the item is heading out the door. I'm assigning it to a warehouse shipment, and that is when I assign my serial number to that item, because that's when it's really the most important to me. I've seen that with manufactured goods like augers, replacement parts, you know, obviously not food items, but big heavy equipment kind of stuff where, you know, yeah, it was manufactured, but really we don't need to know the manufacture date. We really just want to make sure that we're tracking that piece of equipment as it goes out the door and who I sold it to. So the customer that gets it. All right, let's keep going. Still on item tracking setup. This is kind of the setup that I was talking to you about. Keep in mind that even though I've got two sections here, inbound and outbound, if I would only track, if I was only using sales tracking only, I would want to make sure that not only am I tracking it on the shipment side, but also if it came back, if they had to return it for whatever reason. So yeah, I do want to also say, you know, for inbound sales tracking as well. And that would equate to a sales return order. All right, keep on moving. So we've got, excuse me, lot number information that we want to track as well. I've highlighted the 3 fields. This is an optional setting for you. A lot of times companies want to not only track a lot number or a serial number, but they want to track additional information about the item. Maybe there's a QC or some documentation or some CAD drawings that I want to attach to that particular lot number or serial number, or you know, anything that you would want to attach to that lot or serial. We have the ability to do that, and it's through the lot information area. This is also a great opportunity for a lot of the, you know, more, if out of the box lot information didn't track enough information for you, I see a lot of opportunity here for other ISVs that, you know, have a QC add-on to Business Central. They usually piggyback onto this functionality, but really what it is, hey, not only am I tracking lot numbers or serial numbers for this item, but I also want to make sure that the user identifies this additional information that I deem necessary for the item. So lot information must exist when it comes in or when it goes out of the system. And remember, anything inbound means receiving from a vendor, but it also means the result of an assembly order or a production order. So if I'm saying that when I produce something and I need some additional information, maybe some QC results, some test results, some inspection results, you know, this is how I would get that information into the system. Not only get it into the system, but require it by the user. All right, let's see what else we have to set up. There's a miscellaneous tab on the item tracking code card itself. This is used a little less frequent, but definitely frequent for food food manufacturers and folks like that. But we've got, you know, a warranty date formula that we can use. So these 2 fields here would be generally used together. I would say I want to require the warranty date and check that. And then I could say what my warranty date formula is. Sorry about that. Getting a little tickle in my throat. So if you're not familiar with the date formulas, you have the ability to identify from the posting date of the transaction what my warranty date's going to be. So for this item, I want it to be, you know, 6M or 6 months. My warranty date is 6 months past this production date or this receipt date. And that's how the date would work. And then every time I produce that item and was assigned this item tracking code, the system would automatically calculate that warranty date for you. Same with the expiration dates, and then require expiration dates and strict expiration posting. So let's take this one step at a time, because this is where things can get a little tricky. Use expiration dates, that's just what it sounds like. Hey, I want to start using expiration dates. And then I've got this require expiration date, and that's where it gets a little funny. It indicates that expiration dates are required, but it also requires them to be manually edited by the user. So think about inventory being produced, coming off the production line. Not only do I say I use expiration dates, but I'm going to require that user who's posting output to assign that expiration date for me. Strict expiration posting is going to say, hey, if it is 1 day past the expiration date, I cannot handle that inventory. There's a special way to handle the inventory, and it wouldn't be on a warehouse pick or an inventory pick or a sales order shipment. It just would not allow you. It would pretty much, NAV would pretty much see that inventory as non-nettable. You wouldn't be able to handle it on any outbound transaction other than adjusting. So.
Hey, Des.
All right. Yeah.
So we have a question that came through, and you can take a look at it as well. So someone is asking, so if you use lot numbers, do you set all of these, or is it choose one? And she said that what you went over helped, but she's looking at her particular version of Business Central, and she doesn't see where you input this on the item card,
Yep.
on the setup screen.
Yeah, I'll go over that when we jump in. I literally have only one more slide, and then I'll jump in and I'll show you that relationship.
Okay, great.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and good question. All right, last but not least, this is on the item card. So this is, really good lead in here, because, I'm going to go back one and just show you this is the item tracking code configuration or setup. Now my next one is assigning that code to the item itself. So this is the code that I would have generated with all those little checkboxes, and I'm going to assign this to the item tracking tab, item tracking code of each of my items. And then there's a couple other fields here that we can talk about. If I wanted Business Central to generate the serial number or the lot number for me, I'm just going to say, in general, might be desired for serial number tracking. Think about, the difference between lot tracking and serial tracking. Lot tracking is I produce 1,000 units, that entire lot has the same lot number. But if I produce 1,000 units of a serialized item in my item ledger entry table, I have to identify each and every one of that 1,000 in one line of the item ledger entry table with a quantity of 1, because each individual item is serialized. Think about your television or your cell phone or any kind of electronics, kind of like that. All right, remember we were talking about expiration dates on the previous page. So I'm going to back up one, and I'm going to require expiration date. Remember, this was saying I'm going to require it to be manually entered. Okay, or I'm going to use expiration dates. Okay, fine. I'm going to say yes to this, and I'm going to say yes to strict expiration posting. But where is that fancy, date formula thing that the warranty had? Don't ask me why Microsoft chose to split it out this way, but they did. The expiration calculation, I bet you I can answer that too. The expiration date calculation can also be generated for you on the item level. And that's probably the reason why Microsoft did this at the item level. So I can put my 5M or 5 months is going to be my auto-calculated expiration date for anything produced with this, or for this item, because remember, I'm on an item card now. Okay, so disclaimer, if you're using the expiration calculation, backing up a slide, and I've got my require expiration date, they really should just say require manual expiration date. If you have this checked on the item tracking code, then on the item card itself, expiration calc will be ignored. It's just going to require it to be manually entered. But if each individual item has its own expiration calculation, I'd say use this, because that way you don't miss it. You don't have to wait for somebody to, make a mistake and miss entering it into the system and all that fun stuff. So, all right, on to the fun part. So let's take a look at Business Central, and let's hit that first question that we had. I'm going to go to my item card, and I want to show you the relationship between the item tracking codes and the item itself. First of all, I did dive into the item card. Let's look at this. I can do a search for item tracking codes, and here are all my codes that I've got set up. So I've got my lot all, meaning it's specific lot tracking, and I can go here and say edit, and we can take a look at all these fields. So there's that code, lot all, there's the description, give it a little more information. Since it's lot number, not serial number, I'm gonna just shorten our serial number tab, and here we're tracking lot all, so everything, but we're not going to require any additional information. And it looks like we're also going to use an expiration date. So these are all of those settings that I was talking about earlier. So how do I assign this to a particular item? I'm going to do a real quick, shorter list of items so I can be real specific here. So I've got a couple of items configured, and I'm going to just go into one item card. And all the way down on the item tracking tab, I have an item tracking code, and this, I'm going to do an advanced or select from that full list. Here is that list of all those item tracking codes. So this is how I would assign the configuration to my specific item record. So this particular item looks to me like it is not only tracking a lot number, but also the lot information. If I wanted to just confirm that, I can say edit. And I've got my lot information being required. Let's take a look at a couple of the other ones. Here's a lot number, lot specific with sales tracking. So I think this is sales tracking only. No, that's not it. This one. Serial number sales. And I'm on the serial number this time. And you can see that I've only got my sales transactions checked. All right. So I hope that answers your question. Feel free to let me know. Oh, yeah, okay. You said yes, it did. All right, good. So you see how to assign this. Let's keep moving. Let's go into some transactions. It's pretty darn easy, but and what I show you on the receiving part is really going to cross apply to anywhere else in the system. So let's first go into purchases. Let's bring some inventory into our system, and we'll go to this one. And these are the two items that I'm going to receive. I'm going into the blue location of my Cronus database, so that does not require any warehouse tracking. So that means that I'm going to track everything right here on the document itself, on the purchase order or the sales order itself. And to do that, I'm going to go to the line button. I'm going to go to item tracking lines, and I'm going to now. I remember I said you can set things up with a number series, so you can tell the system to automatically generate that number for me, or I can just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now this comes in handy with a company that might be adopting the lot number from the manufacturer that of the inventory that they're bringing in. But for production, same screen that I would use if I was producing this item, or if it was going to be output on an assembly order, I could also use this function that is assign lot number. And it just inserts that lot number for me. And it fills in my quantities. I'm going to receive all 10. Now I also have to assign my serial number. And I'm going to go back to that same screen. And this is really where the auto assignment comes in extremely handy. You're going to see what I mean by that. Assign the serial number. And I get this handy little page here that says, how many do I want to create? In other words, how many am I receiving? And I'm going to say, well, I'm receiving 10. And then I say, okay. And it blew through all 10 and it assigned a serial number. That's all I need to do. And just say, okay. You can manually assign these for serial numbers as well. It's just a little bit easier, especially for serial numbers. Now, if you're going to use serialization and you're going to generate your own numbers for you, or use the manufacturer's number, we all know that serial numbers are extremely lengthy. I would recommend probably using some scanners and stuff like that to get that inventory or data into the system, because human error can happen, and we don't want that. So I've assigned everything. I can just hit post. And I can receive. And my inventory's been received, but I'll go ahead and navigate, and we'll take a look at the receipts. And I'm going to use my find entries. I want to jump into the ledger entry and show you all the serial numbers that I just received, and then the lot number that I just received, quantity of 10. Okay, let's do one more here. I'm going to, let's see, we got 133, 35. So this is that item that really only wants a serial number for sales transactions. So I'm just going to show you that it's really technically not required. I'm going to go to that line, item tracking. I don't have that serial number identified here. And I'm going to go ahead and post and receive it. And it's going to let me receive it. Quantity received. So it doesn't have that serial number, and it really is only required for outbound transactions or the sales transactions. All right, now let's do, I really want to show you, so we've received on a purchase order line. I'm going to just show you one transaction for a warehouse, a location that has full-blown warehouse management turned on, and show you how that works too. It's mostly the same until you get to the warehouse transaction, and then it's a little different. So if this is a warehouse maintained, I need a warehouse receipt in order to receive this into the system. I don't receive on the purchase order, I receive using a warehouse receipt. So I'm going to go ahead and create a warehouse receipt. And then the system takes me there. Okay, so now I'm not on the receipt. I'm sorry, the purchase order. I'm on the warehouse receipt document. This is where I'm going to go to my item tracking lines. And let's see, lot numbers are required for this line. And I am going to go ahead and use the action of assigning my lot. I'll say okay. And then over here, full serial number tracking, line, item tracking, and assign. I'm really just doing this to make it easier on myself and the demo. Okay, serial numbers must have a value in it. You know what? So this is one of those that I have to generate a serial number myself. It didn't have that number series. So I just manually entered those in. You can see how cumbersome this could get if I didn't have a scanning solution in place. So keep that in mind because serial numbers are pretty tedious. And then the next step is just post it to receive it. Post the receipt, I'm gonna say yes, brings the quantity in. But if you're using warehouse management, the system is now requiring a put away. So I've used a warehouse receipt to receive the inventory. Inventory is now on hand, but it's sitting in the receiving bin waiting to be put away. Maybe I lied. Okay, post. Fantastic. I'm going to keep going here, and maybe I can show you with the outbound transactions. I have one more purchase order that I want to go through, and that is this one here. And remember when we looked at those settings, and there was the, the warehouse, track warehouse transaction setting. So I want to show you a transaction for a warehouse that doesn't have that generated or created. So in other words, you start to lose visibility. So I've got my warehouse receipt. Here it is, warehouse receipt. Now I've got to assign its item tracking line. Action, assign serial number. There are my serial numbers. Let me close this. I'm going to post. Hopefully this one posts. And yep, it was posted, and it is also telling me that I have a put away document generated. So on my receipt, I identified the serial number, but now when I go to my warehouse transaction, so the inventory is on hand. Item card, if we looked at it, we'd have 2 on hand that we just brought in. And now I'm on my put away document, and I'm exposed to the action type, so you know that I'm taking it from one bin, my receiving bin, and I'm going to place it, move it to its, where I want to put it out in the warehouse. But look at here. I know I added a serial number, but this item tracking code has warehouse transactions turned off. Hey, if you don't need to track that serial number wherever it goes, from bin to bin throughout your warehouse, this would be a great setting for you. But the reason why I'm showing you this is usually this is something that people don't want. They don't want to lose visibility from bin to bin out in the warehouse. And if today you don't use warehouse management and tomorrow you turn it on, it's just good practice to make sure that you turn that on and leave it on, even if you're not currently set up to use full-blown warehouse management. And what do I mean by that? So let's take a look. I've got it right here, item tracking code. And this is what I'm talking about. I'm on a serial number setup, and notice that this warehouse tracking is now blank or not checked. And I see this a lot of the time. And guess what? If I try to set that after the fact, because you saw me receive the inventory, I assigned the serial number. It went to the ledger entry, but it didn't go to the warehouse entry. And when I attempt to set it now after the fact, it's telling me, hey, I have ledger entries out there, so I cannot edit this transaction, or I'm sorry, this item tracking code configuration. So let's refresh that. And again, I'm going to show you how to change those later on today. So let's go ahead and do some shipping. We brought some inventory into the system. I'm going to go to a sales order, and we're going to do shipments of a couple of items. All right, so lot numbers and serial tracking. I brought these into the system. How do I get them out of the system? Kind of the same way. Go to the line, related information, item tracking, and now this is where it comes in very, it's really important to be very specific. I mean, now I wouldn't want the system to assign a lot number. Now I need to, assign the lot number according to what the picker has brought to me. So what lot number did you pull for the sales order? And I just did a little lookup there, and I'm going to pull, this lot number into my screen. Let's go back to that real quick. And I am going to show you, I'm going to really quick personalize this page. Expiration date, I want to add that here. And then let's close this. And show you that, remember that item that we had configured for that date calculation? This is what it calculated. It goes right from the posting date. It used the 5M, and it inserted for me that lot expiration calculation. So that comes in handy. I don't have to remember to put it in. Now I'll close that, and I'll go in and I'll assign my serial number. Same thing. Usually somebody's going to bring it to me. I can do the lookup. Oop, nope. This is probably the outbound. Yeah, that's the one. So this is the one I'm going to tell the system, hey, I am going to tell you what my serial number is. Maybe it's a sticker that I'm going to put on the unit, or a silver tab that I'm going to attach to the unit on the way out the door. And really, I only want to track that information when I send it to the customer. That's when it becomes super important to our business. Not enough inventory. Okay, apparently I don't have any inventory for that on hand. So let's just go ahead and ship this one item. And actually, before I do that, let's make sure that I can. Yeah, better do this. Here we go. And actually, let's change this item to something I can handle. Here we go. Yes, yes. Deleting this. Delete. Delete. Now I can change my item to the item I really wanted to use for this, for serial numbers for sales only. And let's make sure that we change this location. All right, line, related, item tracking. Let's reassign that serial number. I'm going to say close. And now I will post. And just ship. Oh, look at that. So I do need an expiration date before I post. So that is my strict expiration date coming into play. And so let's go back to, so I really just wanted to get the error so you can see some of the errors that we get. Yeah, let's just keep going here. So
Yes,
anyway.
we do have a question.
Yeah.
What will happen if you assign a lot number and it is past the expiration date?
Oh, we would get a similar error than what we just got. In fact,
Okay.
it would probably, it would actually not even appear when you go to your line and related info, item tracking, it would not let you pull that expired lot. It would give you an error. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Good question. All right, so I want to do a couple more things here. We've assigned item tracking for shipping purposes. We also saw how our configuration of the item tracking code is going to affect our traceability throughout the system. So if the item has warehouse tracking turned on, then it'll be tracked throughout the warehouse, meaning not only my quantity on hand, but also where in the bins or where in the warehouse that lot or cereal is. Now I want to kind of go over some of the traceability that we have. So first things first, if I go to an item card, and we all know the item ledger entry table is pretty fantastic in terms of detail that it helps us trace or track. So that's going to be one area for you to use. So let's take a look at this serial numbers only item. I just kind of want to make a point. I go to related, history, and to my ledger entries. Now I'm going to sort this by entry number. You can see my two purchases come in, and I've got 3 on hand, and then I ship 1 out, and that is when I assign my serial number. So that's what that code sales only looks like with my inbound and my outbound. And you can see that I also did, that's just a purchase receipt. So my sales shipment. So I can always see this serial number and what customer it went out on. If I wanted to do that, I could just go to related and entry. Nope, where is it? Find entries. They move things around on us all the time in Business Central. So I would go to find entries, and then I could see my shipment and who is it for, if I needed to do any kind of recall. There's also another fun way to do this. There's item tracing. I would just do a search for item tracing. I have it saved here, and this is where you enter in the lot number or serial number. Or I could also put an item filter on here too. It is actually legal to create the same serial or lot number for different items, but not the same item. And then which direction do I want to trace from usage back, or from where it came into the system, origin, to where it went out of the system? So origin could be where I received it and shipped it, or where I produced it and shipped it. And then think about too, you know, usage could be also, you know, a component on an assembly order and stuff like that. So I've got my raw materials, what lot numbers or serial numbers for my raw materials went into producing a finished good. And then I'm going to hit the button trace under process here. And here's where I received the inventory. And then it went out on a shipment. And then it also came back into the system on a sales return. And then if I wanted to, I could use this find entries. We saw that on the item ledger, but this tells me everything. This tells me all of my ledger entries. This shows me the shipment that it went out on, the invoice that the shipment was associated to, the credit memo that was associated to the return. This is a warehouse activity, so also, you know, all of my warehouse picks to ship it, or yep, it was a warehouse pick. It was also a warehouse receipt where I received it into inventory, so you can see all of these entries. So if I wanted to dive into one of these, let's just look at that invoice. I can see that here. I can open up the invoice. Go here. And there's my invoice. And here's who it went to if I need to make any calls, etc. So that's the traceability. I would just keep in mind all of your filters. Make sure your filter, these filters here are visible, because you can always eliminate any of the system applied filters and then apply your own filters to look through all the ledger entries, and then use your navigate to find the associated transactions. Okay, let's go back to the fun slideshow. And let's talk about changing those item tracking codes. So Microsoft, you know, we saw the little gotcha on there, and it when we tried to change the item tracking code on one of those, or I'm sorry, the setting on one of the item tracking codes, it wouldn't let us. It says, hey, there's ledger entries that already exist for this item. So Microsoft says, you know, we can't do that. There's a lot of good reasons for that too. It's been like this since the onset, since it was Navision, since it was before Microsoft, et cetera. Really, your lot numbers and your serial numbers can play a role in your inventory costing. And not only that, you can get yourself into some pretty hot water if you're going to edit certain things, you know, certain settings and characteristics of how Business Central is supposed to work midstream, you know. So you could edit the way a transaction is being analyzed. For example, today I don't want to track warehouse entries for this serial number, but tomorrow I do. Well, I've got 100 on hand in the warehouse currently with no serial numbers. How do I edit warehouse entries? That's in a table that can't be edited. It has to be touched by, you know, the posting logic through Business Central. So that's what I mean by gotchas. There's processes that we're supposed to take. Your preparation tasks ensure that all transactions related to that, not only item, but that item tracking code. Remember, the item tracking code can be assigned to multiple items. So make sure that the transactions for that item, and also what I would recommend doing is, if you're going to take this action, always do it in a test database first. Always pick one item and run that one item through the entire process first. And that way you get a clearer picture of what it's going to entail for multiple items or a group of inventory items and stuff. But make sure there are no transactions. You've got to have 0 transactions in the system with that item identified on it. So, you know, check the item, reclass, check all your journals, check all your warehouse journals, check purchases, sales orders, bin contents, everything. Where reservation entries from the item card, you can go to entries and see the reservation entries. I would make sure everything is deleted. It can't be on an assembly order as a component part, etc. You just can't have any transactions out there with this item. For that same item, and when I say item, I mean item tracking code combination. Run the adjust cost and post cost routines. So making sure that number one, you've make sure you've got no transactions and all your costing is up to date. Now it's time for our action steps. So create your new item tracking code with the configuration that you need to have. So before I had it and it said warehouse entries, I'm not going to track them. Well, this time I'm going to create a new item tracking code, and I'm going to make sure that everything was checked that I had checked before, including track warehouse. And then I like to use those configuration packages to take a snapshot of my item setup. So I'm going to export that test item in question. I'm going to export all fields. And then it's just a snapshot in time. So I don't lose that item setup. Remove on-hand quantities. So do a physical count for that item and remove all my on-hand quantities. So take it down to 0. Now I'm going to go to that item card and renumber that item card and then block it. Yes, we're retiring the item, but by renumbering the current item, usually I like to do a Z or an X in front of it. That way it floats all the way to the bottom of your list. But we're renumbering that item. Why? Because now I'm going to take that configuration package that I did just a minute ago, and I'm going to re-import that item back into my system. So I'm reestablishing the same configuration. But remember, I have a new item tracking code. So make sure that on that Excel spreadsheet, you edit the item tracking code to be the current one or the correct one, and now import it. Now you've reestablished that item back as the same item that we all know and love. Nobody has to learn any more item numbers. And I've retired and blocked and renumbered that old number. Now I can bring my inventory quantities back in and reestablish the quantity on hand for that item. It's 6 steps on here, but every company is different. And this process can take hours to fulfill. It's a lot of hoops to jump through. It doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to be meticulous and very calculated with your action steps. You know, I've done this several times. We've done it a lot of times. We've helped customers do this. So it's just tedious. It's not difficult. It's tedious. And then, you know, this reloading of inventory as well as removing the on-hand inventory. Sometimes what I'll do is load the physical inventory journal and then fill in the quantity counted, fill that in with a 0 before I post. I may go ahead and make another configuration package or use the same config package and add the journal table to it and then export this data. And then before I import it, I will edit the data so it matches what I need it to match for an item journal, and then I'll import it that way too. So that you're kind of getting the idea of how to do this change of the item tracking code on a mass basis. I would use those config packages to do that. Okay, we went over a lot. I hope it was helpful. Item tracking code setup, there's a lot there. It doesn't have to be track it all the way through the system. If we really only need to track this item for sales transactions only, you can do it. It's through setup. There's a little bit of item setup to do there. We saw some transactions and we saw some of the differences between, receiving on a purchase order or a sales order, and then the difference between those transactions and your warehouse transactions. We saw how to trace our inventory, and last but certainly not least, changing of those inventory tracking codes, because Microsoft just doesn't want us to do that, by the flip of a switch. So there's a whole long drawn out process. Again, if you have specific questions, you have my email address. Don't hesitate, I'm here to help you. We've done it before. And are there any questions?
Thank you, Des. We did have one more come through. If anybody has any additional, please type those in and we can get them addressed. So the question is, if an item has several lot numbers, how do you know which one is the most current for FIFO? They use lots of numbers, lots of vendor lot numbers.
Yeah, I would go, well, if you're not set up for first, if you're not using expiration date, because there is the FIFO, first expired, first out, NAV does, or Business Central comes with that logic out of the box. You can configure that. If you don't have that configured, then the system would probably have to go by, if you're not tracking any other date, like an expiration date, you'd probably just want to sort the lots with a remaining quantity greater than 0 and sort it by posting date, which that too can have its faults. But typically, in general, you'd be okay by sorting those by receipt date or output date, if it's something that I assemble or if I produce it. I hope that answered your question. Unfortunately, I can't read the questions other than just one line at a time. I don't know why.
That did.
Okay.
I believe so, anyway. All right, well, like Des said, if anybody has any further questions, please feel free to let her know. You have her contact information, and she can get those questions addressed for you. So I just want to thank you all for attending. Thank you, Des, for the presentation. It was very well informative.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
And if you're watching on demand, we thank you for taking the time out to watch this webinar. We do have more webinars coming up. This afternoon, we have Whit Lester from NAV Payroll, who will be presenting on Simple Payroll for Business Central featuring Primo Payday. And coming up on Thursday, we have Pat Lakacher, who will be presenting on Best ERP Housekeeping Practices. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's inovia.com/events. And we do have new training workshops available for you and your team members to attend. Visit our training workshop page at inovia.com/workshops for more information and to register for the training workshop that fits your role. And if some of you do not know already, we do have a podcast going on. It's called the Inovia Conversation, and we just want to encourage you to listen to the selection that our hosts, Steve Waltz and Jeff Progolski, have provided to us. And you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page. And that's inovia.com/podcast. So check out that selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. All right, everyone. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon on another Inovia webinar.